How does one become a bard? Well, Deity Agus Fáilte. Hi, hello, and welcome. Jon O'Sullivan from the Irish Pagan School here. And it is a question that has come up via our community, which is why I'm doing this kind of bard series. But I did have someone reach out wondering, like, is there a way to become a bard in Ireland? Is there training to become a bard? And I suppose the answer, not hard to say, no. There's not there's not currently an Irish bardic school. But maybe in a few years when I'm more skilled myself, maybe I can start one. I don't know. But I think what we need to do is we need to go back to that root question of like how does one become a bard? And for that, we do have information and we do have answers. So the first thing really is to define the role of the bard. In ancient Irish society, the role of a bard was pretty core and essential to tribal existence because a bard wasn't just there to, entertain and tell stories. They're not like a jongler or a court jester or anything like that at all. A bard's role was to witness and remember and to then speak and to use the power of the words that are core to our ability to be a community, to collaborate, to connect, to use the powers that go along with that to support the needs of their community, even if that was the needs of their community against the chieftains of their community, but a little bit more on that later on. Um, so essentially, a bard was there to witness, and we have entire glossaries or sections of our medieval manuscripts known as the Dinshenchas. Dinshenchas stands for the lore of names and places, and it's not that there's just one big book which is the lore of names and places. It's that within the stories, within all of these great sagas of ancient Ireland, our mythology, our Ulster cycle, Fenian cycle, etc., even during the cycle of kings, there's inserted elements were like, oh, well, they're crossing across the plane of this. And this is why that plane is called. And then they go into what's known as a rave scale or a before story or pre-story, which clarifies a bit more context for where the current story is going. But so many of these excerpts are about the landscape itself, about the mountains, the rivers, the plains, the shape of the land of Ireland itself. And the names upon them aren't just, oh, well, we call it river because it's a river. It's known as the River Boyne, for example, because it's named after Boann, which is named after the goddess Boann, whose form became the river, pretty much. So that is Dinhenicus. That section, that lore is Dinhenicus. It is that naming of the place. And it's not just, again, a name of it or the etymology or linguistics of it. It's the tale and the story, the why, the context of it. So all of that information that we have from all of our ancient past is because bards remembered. Bards and storytellers were there to witness and to remember. It was a function of memory for a bard to call on the stories and to be put on the spot. In fact, even at the start of my videos, I start with a kesh or question and respond with the answer, not hard to say. That is an ancient bardic tradition in Ireland because at a gathering, at an Enoch, even in around a hearth fire anywhere, someone could call a kesh upon a bard. And the quality of the bard was judged by their ability to not just have the answer, but then to tell the stories, to clarify the rave scale, and to weave it all into the entertainment. And then, of course, to finish with the reason why, the moral of the story, because all of our ancient stories and tales were teaching tales. So the role of the bard was very, very core, so much so that during the penal law times and even down to St. Patrick himself, aspects and elements of what the bards did was made illegal. There's divinatory practices that are associated specifically with the bards. And St. Patrick is accredited, the patron saint of Ireland is accredited with denying bards that access to divinity, not to divinity, sorry, to divination. Oh yeah, you can tell your stories, you can do all the memory kind of tricks, but you can't use prophecy or divination because that's magic and that's bad. So if there was not significant importance and power within the bardic role, there wouldn't have been a need for the church in the figurehead of St. Patrick to call out that power. If there wasn't such an importance in the influence and the remembering and the retelling of our ancient stories of heroes and, the amazing culture that we have always had on the island, then why was it made illegal during the penal laws to host a bard in your home? An Irish noble who hosted a bard, who brought a storyteller in, could be fined and could be charged for having a bard or storyteller, an Irish bard, in their home. So even contextually speaking there, if these dominant oppressive forces are against bards, then that means bards must be doing something important for their culture. And it really is that. The bards were the keepers of the culture, the keepers of the memory, the tales and the stories of times before oppression, of times before like being conquered and like diminished or demeaned. They're the stories of, well, you are a person of this land because you are in this land, and this land is named for this, or this river near you is named for that. And being able to root a person in their landscape where they live by connecting them to the lore and stories builds a really, really strong bond. And of course, if you want to dominate or oppress a people, you have to sever all those bonds. So hopefully that gives you an insight into like the importance of a bard in ancient Irish culture. And I suppose the next question is, how does one become a bard? What does it take to become a bard? So there's three main routes that we see in the Irish mythology and the lore. Well, there's kind of two, but then there's a third which everyone has to go through anyway. So, the first is you could be born. You could be born of a bardic lineage. There are families who have traced their ancestry and who would in some way have this, my grandfather was a bard, his grandfather was a bard. I am multiple generations worth of a bard in the line of bards of this family. So this does also link with a certain I did a video on it previously about the biology of a bard, that, bards were said to have a vein of poetry in the back of their mind that allowed them to access and to connect with poetry as long as they lay on the ground with the back of their head against the dirt itself and then close their eyes in a quiet, peaceful space that would activate this vein of poetry. Bards were also said to have a unique tongue in that they had two sides, a rough side and a gentle side, or a poison side and a honeyed side, for performing of the two important forms of prose and poetry, which was molla agus which is praise and satire. So again, I have done more videos on that. So there was this understanding that bardic lineage could actually be transferred through a bloodline or through a heritage. Now, if we go back to the Ulster cycle, there is a particular story, and there's a guy called Ahern, and he is an absolute fucking shit show. But he is born, and before he's even born, he has bardic talent. So when his mother was carrying him in the womb, he had enough awareness outside of her and himself to know what he wanted from the world. And so she was at a party and wandering past, Ahern in the baby in the womb smelled ale and wanted his mother to get it for him. And so she went up and pleaded for an ale, but the aleman wouldn't give it to her. And then apparently Ahern, in frustration, spoke a bardic word of power inside her womb and ruptured all of the ale casks, causing it to flood all over the ground. So this individual, once born, has performs a satire that makes a river flood, but then undoes the satire with praise to make the river go back. He threatens people with satires on a regular basis, and he takes advantage in an unjust way, really, of his bardic powers. So there are bad bards, but he was born. There was this born element to talent. The other main one is to be either, you could put it as divinely or otherworldly selected. Now, we see a great example of this in one of Ireland's more, well, actually, the one who's referred to as the last actual bard of Ireland a long time ago, a guy called Turlough O'Carolan. And Turlough O'Carolan, as a kid, was said to have climbed up and fallen asleep on a she mound. A she is this mound to the other world, access into the other world. And when he awoke, he had music inside him. The music was in him, the music of the other world, but he had actually lost his sight. And so Turlough O'Carolan is a very famous blind Irish bard who went around and performed even during a time when it was illegal to have bards perform. Turlough O'Carolan was so good playing harp, doing performances, that he was brought in surreptitiously to get performances in amongst the nobility. And so in his instance, it was the music of the other world, Don Sail Ella, which had imbued itself in him, but it did come at a cost. It did come at a price. Um, Also, yeah, the importance of the deities of Ireland, the Tuatha De Danann, it's possible that they would select and choose people to function in a particular role for them. And those are examples that we see in the stories. Either which way, either if you're born with talent or you're divinely selected or otherworldly chosen or cursed, some might say, training. Training always followed. In a place called Rathcroghan, the complex of Queen Maeve over in County Roscommon, where you'll find it now, there was a up on the hills above. There's a location called Cashel Monaghan, and Cashel Monaghan was the Druid school, and in the Druid school, bards were trained. And so youths who had the propensity to become a bard or had the skills or the lineages or something that within them for that purpose were sent to be trained with the druids, and they were there to function as memory, to build up and to encourage their ability to conceptualize, understand, to memorize, and to retell all of the stories. But it wasn't just down to stories, they had to memorize lineages as well, because in the ancient Irish society, that we didn't have writing. It all came down to being declared. And so within tribal culture, you couldn't become a chieftain or a king unless you had the lineage to become so. And the people who remembered and recalled that lineage were the bards. In fact, we know, for example, it's actually written in the law tracts or Brehon Nemeth that at an Éineach, a gathering of kings or chieftains called by a king, the first thing that has to happen is each tribe's bard has to step forward and recite the ancestry, the lineage, and the location of their liege lord. And that had to be done to ensure that there was enough hereditary connection for that person to have their voice heard at this gathering among chieftains. So the core aspect of this meant that bards had to be able to not just witness, but also remember and to recite in such a way that we know there are very old forms of poetry, the oldest being Rosk poetry, and there's a number of different memory tricks that are built into the recitations. If you'd have to probably look at it in Irish, and the translations that we have in English now do not conform in the same way, but the older versions of the stories, it's kind of easier to see how the sounds link to flow, to go, the story begins to unravel and roll. And all of those performative elements made it easier to remember and easier to recite, and also easier for an audience to connect and to be involved in. So there were a couple of different ways to become a bard, but all of them did involve a certain aspect of training, a certain aspect of education, which then means the importance really that follows from there is not anyone can just, oh, I have a talent for words, I'm going to be a bard. Or like I had a dream or a vision or I had a spiritual experience, I declare myself a bard. Like I didn't declare myself a bard. I go by Dag the Bard. The first name I took writing the stories actually was Scaly Beag because he's on Dagda Moor. He's the big Dagda. And so I went Scaly Beag. I'm the little storyteller. Beag being little, Scaly being storyteller. So I didn't even refer to myself as a bard. It was only later on that people were like, "Oh yeah, you're the Dagda Bard," and I'm like, "No, no, no, I'm the Dagda, I'm the storyteller. I'm just because I understood the importance of what a bard actually is." And it took a while for me to accept the fact that that was the function I was fulfilling for my community. That was the function I was fulfilling for my tribe, witnessing, remembering, and speaking, and educating. The bards were the teachers, very much so too. Um, so the function is again the purpose of the bard is community, and so if a community embraces or accepts or they see the value of the role in that individual, if that allows them to better connect or communicate with me, then I have since then accepted the role, accepted the word of bard upon me. Later on people put priest on me. I didn't want to accept that either, but over time I have grown to accept that function and that role for service to my community because the core of all of this is that it is about other people. I'm not here putting titles on myself just for my own aggrandizement or just to make me feel better or to take an ego trip. When I use the word bard, it is a service that I put like, it is a community obligation, a responsibility, and a service to others. Same when I use the word priest. If people need me to function in the role of pastoral care or sacerdotal care, I will do that work because that's what my tribe, what my community need from me. So if those words, bard or priest, help me be more effective in my work for them, then yeah, those are the words that I will use. But for me, me personally, no, I'm just a guy who tells stories and tries to educate people as much as I can to bring people to a more deep, fuller understanding of themselves, their connection, their spirituality, and Irish deities, mythology, etc., culture and ethnicity, etc. So it is a calling. It is something that, you may be born with. It's something that you may have an inspiration for. You might be called upon to fulfill that role. So many of the stories I have written as the Dag the Bird, I'm going to reach here. I have books out and it's Tales of a Dag the Bird. I had to get over myself a lot to actually produce these books. But a lot of these stories are about me trying to figure out my relationship with the Dagda, my spiritual connection with his God, and to understand what it is to fulfill for him and to fulfill for my community in that way. So, um, now I'm not plugging the book. It's available on the Evil Empire if anyone is looking for it. If because I should tell people that the stories are available. Also, dagthebird.com is where you'll find more information and more stories by me as well. Now, I'm not doing that to grift or graft or anything like that at all. I'm just trying to say, listen, if you are feeling interested or if you're feeling curious or inspired, there are resources for you there, you know? So to loop it all back, like Irish Bardic School, I don't know. Not at the moment. Now, anyone who claims that they have or an ancient, like hidden secret druidic or bardic like lineage passed down through generations, it can't be verified. It can't be confirmed. Now, that doesn't mean that the person might not have information to learn or to share. Okay, great. But you got to look at your resources as well. You got to go back to your sources and interrogate and question those too. I have come across people in my time who claim titles that they don't live up to, who claim, positions that they don't perform to because all of these circumstances are service to a community and service to other people. And so there are far too many people who are more committed or dedicated to the being seen as a performer or what's I'm talking around myself. But really there are okay, the way to really spot someone who is doing it right is probably because they're not making a big show of it. They're turning up, they're doing the work, and they're serving the community. They don't seek to be acknowledged. They don't seek to be, oh, look at me doing this. They don't like seek to force their title upon people. Whereas someone who isn't doing the work, someone who's less about purpose and more about performance, will absolutely seek an audience, will go out of their way to seek attention, to have that attention put upon them because they want to be perceived in a certain way. They want people to recognize, acknowledge, or feed their ego. But those who are actually turning up for their tour, those who are turning up for their community, those who are actually engaging in the work, probably aren't as visible as you would think, unless, of course, they're compelled and obligated by an arrangement with a deity to turn up every day and talk about the Dagda every day. So, that's my job and that's my agreement with him. Um, oh, one other thing I want to definitely mention. Bards is a general term. Many people could choose title of bard, go through training, put themselves through effort, learn the lore, learn how to recite, learn how to perform, and then serve their community in speaking words to power, speaking truth to power, because that's satire. So many people can perform that role. above a bard was a fíle. A fíle was someone who displayed excellence. And excellence was a defined term in ancient Irish law, and to such a degree that if you were excellent, you would no longer be a bard, you'd be elevated within the caste system of the tribe and you'd be fíle. And fíle was could demand the same honor price as a chieftain. So harm done to a fíle would have to be paid as if someone had harmed a chieftain. They were that important. There was one individual above Phillies, and they were known as ollamh, and they were ollamh na hÉireann. They were the ollamh of Ireland. Now, the word ollamh now is taken to mean professor, um, but there was just one individual, and all of the Fila in all of the many, many tribes would come together and compete to be ollamh na hÉireann. And when ollamh na hÉireann aged or died, or actually could be challenged, a Fila could come up and challenge the ollamh na hÉireann to best them in bardistry, to best them in poetry, to best them in knowledge, to best them in form and function and rhythm. And if they could display their magical talents and abilities with linguistics to such a degree that they overcame the ollamh, then they themselves would become the ollamh. And we have an amazing story. It's called A Colloquy of the Two Sages. It is an ancient medieval rap battle, pretty much. And it's this back and forth between this young guy, this young fella who had gone out of Ireland to fulfill his training and to expand his knowledge. He was already trained, but he went to Alba, to Scotland, to pursue further training. He then came back from that and decided to pitch himself to challenge the ollamh na hÉireann. And again, Colloquy of the Two Sages is the name of the story. You can find it on Celt.ie, the Celt Project. It is fantastic to read, but it is this ancient rap battle structure of words back and forward. Now, it doesn't translate very well into the English. The Irish is an older form of Irish, but even if you are in some way comfortable with the Irish words and sounding out the vowels, the way the words flow, the way they bounce off each other, taking the last word said to become the first word said, it is absolutely fascinating and amazing, but I'm getting off topic. So it's Bard, it's Fila, and it's ollamh. Ollamh, you had to best all other Fila to claim yourself as ollamh, and there was only one. Fila was you recognized excellence. You have to have a recognized excellence in your craft. And there is one person in Ireland, Geraldine Merkins Byrne, who teaches Dríocht Ceol, the music of magic, at our school as well as other classes. She is Fila, and rightfully goes by the title Fila, absolutely. Um, me, I'm a couple of years at this. I'm still considering myself in training, and that's why I go by Bard. And it's not because it allows me to be better or to essentially it's a word that allows people to understand the function of the role I fulfill for my tua. So again, the answer not hard to say, but I never said it'd be short. I hope this has been useful. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you would like to know more, do make sure you're checking out our resources, irishpagan.school/free. We've a whole load of more information on the school and classes to take too. Until next time, look after yourself. Take care. Agus slán. Goodbye.